Alright, we're changing the front brake pads and rotors on a 2015 Toyota Camry. Take the bolt out holding on the brake line. Take the two 14mm bolts holding the brake caliper on. Pull the brake caliper towards you to push the piston in slightly to make it easier to take out. Hang the brake caliper up out of the way to make sure you don't damage any of the lines or anything else. Remove the brake pads from the brake caliper housing. Check them and inspect them for any uneven wear. Take the two 17mm bolts out that are holding on the brake caliper bracket. Once you've done that, just pull the brake rotor off. It should come off pretty easily. Clean up all of the excess brake dust, rust, corrosion, whatever's on the hub itself. Make sure to give everything a good wipe down before you put the rotor back on. Put some anti-seize on the face of the hub so in future the rotor won't corrode onto it or you'll have any issues down the track. When you get your new rotor out, make sure to spray it with some brake cleaner and wipe it down to get all those oils off. Once the rotor's on the hub, grab a wheel nut and just put it on. It makes mounting everything up a lot easier. Now go to your caliper mounting bracket, give it a good thorough clean, clean all the guides, clean everything you can, spray it down with brake cleaner. This just helps in the future so when the brake pads do wear, the brake dust has somewhere to go and it doesn't just start mounting up. Make sure to get the brake caliper guide pins out and give them a good clean and reapply some grease. Make sure they move freely through the actual housing and there's no leaks coming out of any of the seals. Again, just making sure everything is as clean as you can get it. You don't want any issues down the track, so make sure to get in there and clean up everything you can get your hands on, especially where the brake pads will actually slide along those guides that are on the mounted caliper bracket. Just apply the smallest amount of thread lock to the caliper mount bracket bolts. This just has a little bit of insurance later on down the track that you won't have any issues with it rattling out. When you put these bolts in, if you're going to be using power tools, just make sure to put the threads in at least 2 to 3 turns, because if you end up cross-threading in this hub, it's going to be a bit of an annoying job to fix that up. Nip everything up by hand just to double check everything. You don't want to just leave it to your power tools doing it, having a low battery and it not putting the correct amount of force on. Get your new brake pads out, apply the smallest amount of grease to where it's going to slide. You don't have to put a ton of grease or anti-seize on it, just the smallest amount just to ensure later on in the future that if there's any issues with corrosion or anything like this, you know you're going to have your brakes wearing evenly. Just compress the piston in now to the actual caliper. Make sure you've got the cap off the reservoir and make sure the reservoir isn't too full or it will overflow. So you just want to monitor that brake reservoir and make sure it doesn't overflow or anything like that and land onto your car's paint, because it does a lot of damage really quick as it's extremely corrosive. Just make sure to clean up as much of the caliper as you can, get all that brake dust off, wipe everything down thoroughly, make sure all the seals and everything in the piston are good too. If you have any leaking or any issues there, you're going to have to address it now or you're going to have problems later on down the track. Once you've lined everything back up, put the smallest amount of Loctite onto these caliper bolts. Again, this is just to make sure that anything in the future you won't have any issues. These bolts will tend to spin in the guide pin housing when trying to loosen them or put them back in. So just get a spanner and just hold it onto the guide pin and generally it'll be fine. Again, just make sure to turn the bolts in by hand a few threads. We don't want to cross thread anything into this caliper housing. Then grab a ratchet and just make sure to tighten them up by hand and make sure they feel alright. Bolt the brake line back on. When you've done that, give everything a good thorough clean. Double check everything, go over your work, make sure you've done it all correct and everything feels pretty good. Thanks again for watching.